A little brief segue, if I may. The war in Gaza that's happening at the moment. One of the things that you and we're both veterans of several campaigns, and one of the frustrations is that our political masters often very enthusiastic about sending us to war, but haven't really thought through the day after. Certainly listened and watched and read about your views about after Iraq and Afghanistan, and I served in both of those as well. It's fascinating when you look at the Gaza war, whatever the rights and wrongs, we're not really trying to get into that.
Sure.
But it's not entirely clear what Netanyahu's aim is for the day after. I'm not talking about how he manages the very next day. I'm talking about what does good look like? What does that end state look like? The world thought it was two-state solution. They've been pretty clear not. What's your take on all of that?
Well, I think Netanyahu clearly is not... I don't think he's got clarity over this in his own mind. His declared aim was to destroy Hamas. Well, frankly, dream on. You don't destroy an idea. It's a political idea as much as anything. You can degrade the military. You can do all sorts of military type stuff, but that is not going to solve the problem. In the classic, whether it was us going into places like the Balkans or whatever, the military are there to secure the environment within which the politicians and others then begin to sort out the problem. And I don't think Netanyahu's thought about that at all. My own view is...
But if he hasn't, surely that's just anger.
Well, of course it is. But then why... I mean, this is the... again, one's got to be careful how you say this, but Hamas were very clever. Netanyahu, in my view, fell straight into the trap that Hamas set them. Why did they do those raids in October, or that raid in October? Because they were worried that most of the Arab world were getting alongside Israel, they were accepting Israel, they were moving on, all sorts of agreements being signed up to, Saudi Arabia talking about this and so forth. Hamas realized that they were losing their intent, which was the destruction of Israel, basically. I mean, that's, alongside, and of course being fed by Iran and so on. So they launched that attack. I'm quite clear in my own mind about this. They launched that attack in order to cause so much havoc, do so many nasty things, in inverted commas, in order that they would force Netanyahu to react. And he would react by attacking Gaza. And that would then turn world opinion back to supporting Palestine and all the things that we've seen flowing from that. And to be fair, to some degree, they have achieved that.
Yeah, but isn't it a sad indictment? Like, going back to the point, though, that... so I remember... President Bush was angry when 9/11 happened. He was angry that people...
Yeah.
So he went with anger to go and somebody's going to pay for this.
Yep.
And I remember Tony Blair hanging onto the coattails. And there wasn't really much thought put into it.
I mean, declaring a war on terror is like declaring war on evil. You're not going, you're not going to win through on that.
No,
and that's
it
exactly
just feels,
what Netanyahu
did.
Did.
As you say, the military, we try to hold our leadership to account because we know it's going to cost lives, these campaigns. You've got to have thought them through. Because the military probably will do most of what they're tasked to do. But if the politicians haven't thought through what you're going to do once that's prevailed, and it's just not clear to me what that next... And it feels like in Gaza, there's been a horrendous amount of deaths, whatever the actual numbers are, whatever is Palestinian people have suffered, the Israeli people have suffered. How do you solve the problem? And it's not by dealing with the symptoms, it's dealing with the disease. And that feels like something that Netanyahu and Yahya Sinwar or whoever, they're not going to be able to come up with a solution. It feels like in the past you had Clinton and Yasser Arafat, but that picture, which was iconic, was unbalanced because it was an American president with Israeli prime minister.
Yep.
Whereas if you'd had an Arab leader as well as...
Sure.
And it just, how do we end up with this not becoming a perpetual... conflict?
Well, in a way, it is a perpetual conflict because
Well,
it's been going on since 1948.
Yeah.
And we were part of that, initially.
Yeah.
But I think part of the problem here is that Netanyahu is not helping by... in the last few days, I think, he has legitimized 3 more settlements in the West Bank. And, the whole issue about what that looks like and so on. So I think he has... he has not got a clarity of how he thinks it's going to end. My own view is they will have to stay in Gaza. IDF will have to stay in Gaza. They won't destroy Hamas, but they'll do enough damage to push, stop Hamas being a capable military force, although they're nowhere near as capable as Hezbollah and so forth, which is not part of this issue. But they'll have to stay in Gaza. They will have to work with some of the people in Gaza who they can trust, be they local equivalent of warlords or whatever, local barons. So they'll have to keep a security presence there. And then they've got to think through what that means for the rest of that regional conflict with Hezbollah and the West Bank and so on. He doesn't agree with a two-state solution. To be honest, I've never thought the two-state solution would come to fruition, although I can understand the arguments. But okay, so what does he believe in? They don't like the idea of a one-state solution because the overwhelming, just in terms of pure numbers of people and so forth, they would become a minority pretty quickly. So I don't know what's in his mind about how he sees this finishing.
Because there is a view that he might actually be clear. Because actually, if it is a one-state solution, but it's going to take a long time to solve that numbers issue, Israel is the dominant military power in the region. And as you say, we tend to be looking west towards Gaza rather than east towards the West Bank. Yeah. If you were doing an independent look at this, you'd say, actually, it does look like this is a long-term strategy.
I think you're giving Netanyahu more credit than he deserves.
Okay.
Ultimately. And I think there's a lot of debate and discussion within the cabinet and within Israel as a whole of what this thing's going to look like. So I don't. This is not going to end easily. It's going to be long running. It's going to be a continuation of the last, whatever it is, 60, 80 years. I think, but picking up one of your earlier points, which I think could be a game changer, is if the Arab world began to genuinely try and engage with this on the basis of what's been going on for the last 20 years, their relationship with Israel. I mean, they hate Hamas. Most of the Arab world does not like Hamas. And they, in a way, they've been quite comfortable with Israel taking out Hamas's military campaign, partly because of its link with Iran, but also partly because of the internal stuff within Palestine. So if the Arab world was prepared to start taking a lead, both in rebuilding, both in building political bridges, and in terms of ensuring that the Palestinian... See, the other thing we shouldn't forget is the Palestinian people voted for Hamas. People talk about innocent civilians.
A long time ago, though.
It was a long time ago, but nonetheless, in their manifesto, Hamas have been quite clear. We want to destroy Israel. And a lot of people went along with that. Well, hopefully that has changed because it was quite a long time ago. So how does that Arab world get into that and begin to win the battle of ideas and change the dynamic?
Because it feels like that the whatever the future holds, and neither of us are going to be able to solve that,
quite.
But it feels like providing, Israeli security is clearly vital, but so is it for the Palestinian people.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
Prosperity for Israel is good, but actually so is it for the Palestinian people. And if you look at the metrics of economics, it's been downhill all the way for Gaza and the West Bank, and you sort of go, in those sorts of environments, it's a petri dish for insurgents, for violence, for radicals. And it feels like traditionally the Arab world has provided them money to rebuild Gaza regularly. Yeah. But if only it could go one step further.
Well, that's my point about it. Now, the other thing we should say here is that my own experiences in places like Northern Ireland and so forth, how you conduct these operations clearly matters. So as a simple picture, I imagine this as a sort of archery target. There's a gold middle centre to this. And they are the hard terrorist, in inverted commas, insurgents. They're the Hamas killers. They're the people who are prepared to shelter behind civilians and shelter in hospitals and all this stuff. And that's the centre. Relatively small numbers. Northern Ireland, it was probably never more than, a couple of thousand hardened terrorists who were prepared to go out, blow people up, kill people and so on. You then have an inner circle of people who would never be prepared to do that, but they are very sympathetic to the cause. They're prepared to hide the weapons and finance what's going on and all of that stuff. Probably 5 to 10 times as much as the middle. Then there's this big outer circle, which in Northern Ireland was the vast bulk of the people who would never have gone and killed and blown people up. They were not prepared to finance and hide weapons and hide terrorists, but they were pretty sympathetic to the cause. That cause, be it from the fact that the Roman Catholic community were badly treated in Ireland to the idea of a united Ireland. So if you transfer that across to what's going on in Israel at the moment, Hamas is the gold centre of this, and Israel are trying to degrade them. They won't destroy them, as we said earlier, but they'll do a lot of damage. But of course, if you want to win these campaigns, you have to win the battle of ideas, and you have to separate out. And what Israel are doing is drawing people in from the outer circle to the inner circle, and the inner circle to the centre. There's a generation of young people growing up in Gaza who are going to be the next Hamas terrorists and so forth. So somehow they have to, they have to win that battle of ideas, and they have to reach out in a completely different way, in my view. Which is why I've always felt Netanyahu just fell into this trap, and in that sense, Hamas are achieving what they wanted to achieve. They're generating another generation of hardened fighters and bitterness and anger and so forth, and somehow that needs to be broken. I think it can only be broken by other Arab nations engaging somehow in a more positive and deeper sense. What that looks like, I don't know, is the honest truth.